Hey everyone, this is Daniel,
And I'm Jun.
and we are
Korean
American. All right, guys, here we are. Another episode of the Korean American podcast with some guests. So, to kick it off, I'd love to just give a brief intro. First of all, Young, Grace, thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us here in person.
Maybe just to begin, could you all give us a brief intro? Introduce yourselves, and specifically dialing in and diving into the cultural background that you think has formed you and from where you're coming from.
So I'm Grace. I'm a mom of 3. I am an MBTI ENFJ.
Oh, we're doing that today.
I just feel like it's a Korean thing. Korean
Yes.
people always want to know. Enneagram 2. And I think cultural background. I was born here in Korea and I went to the States when I was 2.
I didn't know that either. Actually, I thought you were born in America like
No,
me.
I was born here.
Okay.
And yeah, so I grew up in the States basically my whole life.
Which part of the States?
East Coast, New Jersey.
Hey guys, I'm Young, and I'm really happy to be here today. And my cultural background is I was born in Korea. I moved when I was 10 years old. So I think I could say I'm both half and half. I lived in the States, in the US for about half of my life.
Okay.
And then the other half of my life, I live in Korea.
And then I guess, well, you guys are in Korea now. So how long have you been living in Korea? And I guess what brought you back?
So we've been here 10 years. I think shortly after we got married, maybe like year 2 or 3, Young was offered a job to work here in Korea, but for the US government. And so we moved here thinking we would only be here for 2 years.
End up being now 10 years.
Yeah.
So we've been here quite a bit. And out of those 10 years, 4 years were in Seoul, 4 years were in Pyeongtaek, and now 2 years we're in
Ansong.
Ansong. Oh.
Okay, awesome. I guess, Young, you and I went to college together.
That's right.
So that's how we know each other.
Yep.
It's been what? We started college in
2002, so it's what,
Wow.
almost 22 years. You're
I've
old.
known you more than
Yeah.
half my life.
Yeah, I
Wow.
know, right?
Is that right?
Yeah.
That's
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
That's crazy. Yeah.
You guys met when you were like, what, 18, huh?
18.
Just out of
yeah.
high school.
Wait, Americans? So you went to college a year younger? Is that how it works?
18 when you start college.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or you didn't skip a year or anything?
No.
Because you're in Korea, you're supposed to start at 2003.
Oh, is that
In
right?
your age.
I see.
That's interesting.
June, I think we've mentioned this before. Yeah, Koreans start even 1 or 2 years later. And then if you add in army service time as well, Korean men kind of start their life 3-4 years later than American men in that sense. So a lot of milestones I think are reached later. But okay, yeah. So before we get into it even more, we like to ask all our guests on a scale of Korean American spectrum, 1 being true 100% just Korean, 10 being we have to have a better description. He's like John Wayne cowboy, like white American,
Yeah.
right? Where do you fall on that spectrum? And
I think I fall right in the middle, 5, but more towards American side, so 5.5.
5.5.
Yeah, spectrum.
I would say I'm slightly more American than Young, so maybe 6.
okay,
6.5.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I think knowing you two, that's about right. You are somewhere in the middle, but Young, actually, even though you moved to Korea later, I do feel like you're more American.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know.
he is. I think, we'll get into it, but the way that he thinks and lifestyle-wise, I think is more American.
Yeah. We might not get a chance to get to this later, so I just wanted to bring it up. When I first met you, Young, I remember we were playing basketball, but I found out you played high school football,
That's right. Yeah.
which I don't know how common that is for Korean Americans to be playing football,
Yeah.
right? We're not as big,
Like
etc.
American football,
Oh,
not
sorry, yeah.
soccer.
For the
Yeah.
audience, yes, American football,
Yeah.
like.
So when I immigrated to the States, I think sports was a big part of like being popular amongst the kids. So I think that was a sports that I took on to just show them, hey, I could also play football too.
Yeah.
And so I really enjoyed that time with working with the team and camaraderie with the group. And so
Yeah.
that's why I got to play football there for 2 years.
Was that like a very intentional choice of yours though? Like, hey, I'm gonna like try to fit in with American culture, make friends this way, or like, yeah, again, how'd that come about?
Yeah,
So to be clear, like a lot of my friends also did play high school football growing up, but again, they're like me, born and raised in America. Like we love American football, right? But for you coming from Korea, again, I was so shocked to hear that.
yeah. I mean, like I remember my first practice, I was trying to put on a helmet for the first time, and I didn't have a face mask because they're trying to fit me into the right size.
Yeah.
I think so. It was kind of interesting, but I think I wanted to prove myself that hey, I could play, like I could be, equal with playing sports, just like any sports though.
I think the context for you though is he went when he was like elementary school, like
Fourth
fourth
grade.
grade, fifth grade, and you know, like developmentally, I think that's when boys start to like really figure out who they are. And because he didn't speak any English, I think there was a lot of inclination for kids to tease, right? And so I think I remember you telling me, right?
Yeah,
I don't know
yeah.
why I'm telling you your story. But
Well, yeah, I think just want to be accepted by the my classmates and
Yeah.
my friends. So I was like, oh, let's play football because it was a popular sports in my high school days. And
Yeah.
I was like, oh, then, and they actually did like a trial, and when I was playing, they kind of start like 40-yard dash, and I was one of the fastest kid.
Oh, wow.
During that time, and the coach is like, oh, we gotta get this guy on board.
yeah, so it didn't start off you right away with
Yeah.
football. It was more like running track, and then I think eventually in high school you
that
found.
was probably my
Yeah.
passion. For
Oh, you
it.
got recruited.
I mean,
Scouted.
yeah. I mean, So
Yeah.
freshman, I just played freshman team, and then sophomore, actually, I became a varsity.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really rare within that time. So yeah, it was fun times. I
That's
missed
awesome.
that. Yeah.
What's a varsity? Sorry, for a 2.5.
Oh yeah, that's right. So varsity is so there's junior varsity.
June being 2.5 on the Korean American
Oh,
scale.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, so varsity is when you are playing in a
Starting
team, your high school.
I
So
see.
there's junior varsity is kind of the junior level. So I guess the minor league, and then the varsity could be the more of the major league.
I see. I see.
Yeah.
4-year varsity volleyball player right
Wow.
Just a
Volleyball.
plug.
there. All the Asians
Yeah.
gravitate to volleyball where I lived.
Yeah.
Is there a reason? And I also wanted to ask, this is a follow-up question
Yeah.
after this, but like because you guys meaning America, the only nation that sort of plays American football, right?
Yes,
Hence
yeah.
the name American football. So I was wondering if there's like anything so intrinsically American that only Americans tend to enjoy and play about the sports itself.
It's a good question. I don't necessarily know the roots of it. I would say it's a mix of rugby and I don't even
Yeah.
know.
Like, why hasn't it expanded out to the world?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I think personally, I think you had to wear like a lot of equipment.
Uh-huh.
So to afford that, I think you had to have like helmet, your pads, and also I think that in that sense, it's hard to play. In just basketball, you just need a ball and a hoop.
That's true. Yeah, it
So
does
you
require
need
a
to
lot of
be
equipment.
more of a developed country. So it's a developed country sport.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
It's
Okay.
also very violent.
Yeah, it's very violent. It's actually nowadays it's very looked down upon to have your children play
Oh.
because of the amount of trauma you get,
Oh, I
like
see.
literally head trauma, injury. And when you are a developing kid, to like have that much like contact. And same thing goes for like soccer. Soccer, there's a lot of contact, but this is even more like you're literally equipping the children with all this padding and helmets so that you're like
You're tackling
having-
the opponent.
head
understand.
on
Yeah.
like collisions.
Interesting. In my college there was a American football team. I mean, I
Oh.
think it was do you know what a 동아리 is? It's like a
It's like
club.
intramurals.
Oh,
Yeah,
intramural.
Yeah,
Okay,
club,
okay.
yeah.
But so people do play outside of America,
Yeah.
but like they never form a league or something, which I find interesting.
I think Americans haven't, the NFL has been trying to expand it for a long time now. And they are starting to show games, let's say, have the kickoff or season opener in like London, Mexico City, things like that. But definitely it hasn't like taken off yet. Personally, I think it has a naming problem because it's called football. but everywhere else in the world besides America, football, soccer to Americans, right? But anyway, but
Also,
yeah,
also my follow-up question would be, what is with volleyball and Asians?
yeah, this is a good one. In America, volleyball's typically seen more as a women's sport, but again, there are plenty of men's volleyball players and professional leagues, etc. And but for whatever reason, again, volleyball like basketball really favors height. And Asians aren't tall. Like, why did we gravitate towards volleyball? I can honestly say I don't know why, but I guarantee you most people played volleyball because it helped them get into college. It was a sport you could put on, and like maybe other people weren't trying to play volleyball.
I think it's not
so
as
we could get into it.
mainstream.
It's definitely not mainstream.
So like I think in America the mainstream sports are like basketball, baseball, football, soccer, like those.
Hockey,
So
hockey. Those are the four major
So then
sports.
like
Yeah.
if you want to be more competitive or kind of like 인정받아, I guess like acknowledged for your level of like athleticism,
Yeah.
I feel like doing like a not so mainstream sport, I guess. It's like tennis too. Like I feel like a lot of Asians
Yeah, a lot of
play
Asians play tennis. Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, I think football and like wrestling, for instance, like a blue collar kind of level, sports.
Yeah.
So, you don't think of it as like, oh, it's like very nice to play football or, tennis, or wrestling. So I think that's.
Young, you also wrestled, right?
Yeah, I wrestled too. Yeah. So, yeah.
Why did you gravitate towards those?
Because my friend told me it was a fun sport, but it was one of the toughest sports I ever played.
Interesting.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
it was a good time of just like self discipline to keep the weight and stuff. So
Interesting.
All right, so yeah, let's move on. So, okay, you've been living here now 10 years, so it's a long time. But I'm curious, is there anything that you still maybe miss about the U.S.?
I miss American Chinese food.
Yes, yeah.
Just not like the Panda Express here you could find. I want like full MSG experience and like egg drop soup, noodle soup, wonton soup. So I don't know, I just really miss that. So every time I go back,
that's what you
first thing
seek
I go.
out. Yeah. Okay.
So maybe
Literally
that's
first meal here. As soon as we land.
No, I miss it too.
Yeah.
Because Chinese food in Korea is more
Jjajangmyeon.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Chinese Korean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jjajangmyeon, jampong, like
Oh.
yeah.
But Young, I think you're saying that even the American Chinese food in Korea is different from the American
Yeah.
Chinese.
Oh,
it tastes
okay.
different. I don't know. It's just I guess they don't put too much MSG
Interesting.
or
It's expensive for me.
yeah, it is expensive. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's more cheap meal you could get. And I
Yeah,
just
in America, it's
you
known to
grew
be
up
cheap
eating
food,
that.
yeah.
It's a
I think it's
takeout
more
food.
of like a delicacy in Korea.
American
it's like very
Chinese.
exotic, right?
Oh.
Yeah.
American style Chinese food in Korea.
Yeah.
I think for me, I mean, other than the obvious like family and friends that live in the States, I think the first things that come to mind are like Trader Joe's,
Ah. So
Target,
like those
Home Goods, Whole Foods, like those things. But actually, this is an interesting question because for us, we kind of have the best of both worlds. So there's not much that we really like miss about America because Young works on the army base.
yeah.
So we have like access to the typical like American goods and even a certain type of like American lifestyle when you go on base. So it's not too much of honestly life in America that we like really miss other than like people. I think that's our main thing. Yeah.
We mentioned this before. When I go onto a U.S. military base, it just feels like I'm instantly transported to America.
Yeah.
So people are loud, super diverse, different races.
People even
the
say
restaurants.
it smells like America. And I think part of it, is like the cleaning products that they use.
Oh.
Because there's got to be something that they're using like that's across the board just gives like an American smell of like, I don't know. I think it's like the cleaning products.
It's the Clorox, right? They
Yeah,
use
maybe.
really strong
Clorox.
Clorox
Yeah.
cleaning. And I don't think Koreans use that as much.
Yeah.
Young, maybe for the audience who doesn't know, could you talk a little bit about Humphreys, the military base? Because again, I didn't know about it before I moved here, and it's
Yeah, so the Humphreys base expanded over the years, and it's almost a city of its own. It has, hospital. It has,
Schools.
school system. It has its own shopping malls. So there's a lot of people living within the Humphreys base, and it's the largest overseas base outside of U.S. So it's just a little America, I guess you could think of. And it has
Didn't you say it's like the size of Washington D.C.?
yeah, they say that it's about size of
crazy.
Washington
Interesting.
D.C.
Yeah, I was gonna ask how big. And then, do you know how many people are living there?
Yeah, there are about like 40,000.
Jeez, yeah,
in
it
and
really
out.
is a
Yeah,
small
it's a
city.
small city. And then, yeah, everything is, I guess, convenient to have that access to American like food, shopping malls, and things like that. So that's what Humphreys is.
June, have you ever been on a U.S. military base?
Yeah, so I think when I was little, and I think it was less stricter
Yeah.
about like who they can let in. I don't know, maybe it was a sketchy way. But when I was little, for some reason, so I was living in Daegu,
Yeah.
and Daegu's military base is Camp Walker, right? So, funny thing, I went into the military base to get English lessons.
Oh, really?
Yeah, from this like, I think it was a daughter of like someone who works in the military.
Yeah.
I still remember her name. It was Nicole.
Wow, left an impression on you.
Yeah.
Nicole, if you are listening.
And I also went there to enjoy the Halloween parties.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
they didn't
they
have
still
like
do that.
yeah, because like even in like early 90s
Yeah.
or like mid 90s, Halloween wasn't really a thing in Korea.
No,
And
it wasn't even
yeah.
until very recently. I feel like.
Yeah, and I can still remember how scary it was because like they actually
Go all
like
out.
제대로
Yeah.
했어. Yeah.
They.
Like people like there's like this haunted house thing
Yeah.
that you have to like go through.
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
like,
yeah.
it was super scary.
Well, was it your 2 years in America that clued you into Halloween? Because you said back then Halloween wasn't a thing. So what even made you go to the base to go to the Halloween?
I don't
as a
remember
kid?
exactly, but I did know what Halloween was because of my experience living in the
Oh, okay,
States.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't remember very clearly, but one thing I remember is that the scale of things are very different from Korea, and I think that's the thing that really transcends you into the US.
America,
Yeah,
yeah.
because everything's like slightly bigger. It's like very odd feeling.
That's right.
That's the essence of America.
Yeah,
Bigness.
bigger. Yeah, so even like the parking space, here you had to park back, or you could actually go straight. It's fine with the big cars, and base has its own zip code.
Oh, yeah.
So zip code is what identifies the area in the states. So
Oh, and also the symbolic stop sign that you don't have in
that's
Korea.
right. It
Oh
actually
my
says-
gosh, I've just
yeah.
that red octagonal
Octagonal
stop
stop,
sign.
yeah.
That's not in Korea.
It's not. It doesn't say Cheongji.
Really?
It says
People have it.
They do, yeah, right.
it says Cheongji, but it just says
Oh,
stop.
it doesn't say stop.
Yeah.
Okay, but it's the same shape and color. It
That's
just
right. I
says
think so, yeah,
something
yeah.
else.
It's octagonal in Korea.
It's not.
I think it's like triangular for some reason.
That's the like usually the warning sign, right?
Maybe.
Triangular.
I drive so much, but how do I not know that? Wait, sorry, my mind's being blown a little
Now
bit
we
right
have to
now.
look it up.
Yeah.
Are there not stop signs in Korea?
There's stop
There
sign.
is.
That's octagonal.
Okay.
Yeah, it says Cheongji.
Yeah.
Okay. But you know what it is? I feel like
Oh, it is. And it also does this.
All right.
Say stop.
get out of here, Jun. No, but you know what it
Yeah.
is? In Korea, I feel like
interesting.
there's just traffic lights everywhere. So there's not as many stop signs, right? Or maybe where you guys live, there
Yeah,
are.
yeah.
yeah.
There are.
Yeah.
But it's funny because I don't think people
But
really abide
respect
by it.
them.
Yeah.
For some reason, the driving experience in the U.S., like the stop sign is such an integral thing.
No,
Like,
I
you
agree
always
with
have
you.
to-
I agree with you.
But
Yeah.
like you don't really recognize a lot of stop signs here, right?
I don't think there are many. I would say almost everywhere in Korea, it's just traffic lights.
Yeah.
Because again, it's so congested, so busy. What would a stop sign do? It would just
It
cause
doesn't do
mass
anything
chaos.
because I can tell you for sure, like right in front of our kids' school, there is.
No.
But it's funny because there's a traffic light and a stop sign.
Ah.
So even if this is like a blinking yellow light, which sometimes they change it depending on the day,
They won't
or
stop.
time of day, people don't slow down. And this is like a school zone where
Yeah.
you know they're supposed to slow down, but nobody sees a sign on the right because it's so, I don't know, it's just not as like blatantly like big, like back to the bigness
Yeah.
of America.
Even
I
the
think
stop signs are
Korean
bigger.
Stop signs are smaller,
Maybe.
even in size too.
But I will agree. Stop signs in the U.S. are like the integral part of the driving experience, whereas in Korea you hardly see them. Yeah.
And you have to also fully stop in America.
Yes,
But
yeah.
here, people kind of like half stop. and
I'm sure the
then-
rule in Korea too is you should stop. But
I mean, I see like the blinking red light. People
Yeah.
just go through. It's almost normal, but
all right, one more warm up then. I'm curious, after being here 10 years, if you can remember, what has been one of the hardest things for you to adjust to living here?
I think it's public image, like how they see us like, differently. So like I have some facial hair and some, just personal, but a lot of hair
Body
compared
hair.
to body
You're a
hair.
hairy dude. Yeah. You're one of the few
Yeah.
Koreans that are hairier than me.
Yeah.
No, I'm very hairy.
Yeah.
I mean,
Like
yeah.
chest hair, I mean, like that's next level.
This,
So
this is great.
yeah,
TMI.
yeah, TMI. But anyway, so I just feel like I need to like shave because
Really?
a lot of people, when they see you like with even your facial hair, they're like, "Are you
They
okay?"
comment,
Yeah, they
yeah.
comment on you like, "Are you sick?" or "You like, are you okay?"
Oh wow.
Yeah, yeah. If I have full like facial hair, so
Or they'll just be like, "Oh, why don't you shave?"
shave it. Yeah.
Like they'll blatantly just ask.
Yeah, I get that a lot too.
Oh, do
Really?
you?
Yeah. I usually only shave on Mondays.
Yeah.
Then grow it up.
During the
until,
week.
Yeah, Sunday, and then as the time progresses, people always ask like, why don't you shave?
Interesting.
Not every day, but I get it every here and then.
Occasionally,
Yeah.
yeah.
Wait, Jun, can you comment on that then? As a Korean, what's the perception of someone who has like stubble or is growing some facial hair? Because I've never heard this before, and I, never had nunchi over it.
Yeah, it's not a thing that you grow hair. Usually, I think the standardized look of men is that you shave.
Clean shaven,
Oh.
yeah.
Yeah.
I
And
didn't
so
know.
like I think there's a conception of if you don't shave, it means like there's a word called pain.
Mm.
You know what pain is?
Like you're sick,
Apple?
Yeah.
apple, or
I don't know. I don't have a translation for that.
Mm.
But
Wait, it's not pain. Pain.
no, it's a Korean word.
Oh.
But it's
Oh,
like
a pain. It means
someone
like-
who like sort of given up on
yeah,
life.
life. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like typically like let's
Defeated
say you're
person, defeated person.
unemployed and
Yeah.
you're in your house all
Which
day.
I am. Yeah.
Like you don't like
Which I am.
you don't shave kind of thing.
Ah,
Yeah.
I see. I
Yeah.
see.
Unless you wear it very fashionably.
Okay.
Right.
But even then, you can tell they like,
Yeah, I think Koreans are all about like maintenance, right? Like
Yes, yes,
looking
yes.
looking a
깔끔해.
certain yeah. So then it's like if you're not shaven,
Yeah.
which is a thing in the States, right?
Yes,
Like facial hair, it's like more common. Here, it's like you just look like you're not 관리 안 한 사람처럼 보여. Like you didn't take care of yourself. So that's why I think the questions come like, are you sick? Is something wrong? Did something happen?
now I know. I mean, I feel like I would get complimented in the U.S. on my facial hair,
Yeah.
but in Korea, never.
Yeah.
Or you have to groom it very neatly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that they understand you did
It's
this.
purposeful.
Yeah, purposefully did it. Yeah.
Interesting.
But Korea back in the days, they had beard, right? Full beard. Like
Yeah,
that
but
also
not-
shows a
that's-
status. Like
I see.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm not growing the
Zombie?
full
Zombie,
like. Yeah.
Is that
Noble
before
beard.
we had the shaving?
So wait, Young, that was adjusting.
Yeah,
for
that
you.
was hard for me to
Okay,
just
okay,
first when I
okay.
first came to
Got it.
Mm.
Yeah.
Korea.
I think for me too, it's similar. At first, like when I first came to Korea, so much talk or comments about appearance
yes.
really kind of irked me.
Yeah.
I think especially having grown up in the States where it's sort of taboo to comment about other people's looks or weight
Yeah.
or like, oh, you don't look so well or any of those types of typical like questions that you get here. I think a story is like, especially after I had our first child, like, Koreans talk about like 붓기, like you get very swollen just from all the water weight and like the retention. And I hadn't lost that yet because it was very shortly after having given birth. So I'm still in like my postpartum recovery stage.
Yeah.
Kid you not, every single person I met, whether it be friend or family relatives, they were like, oh, you haven't lost your weight yet.
Wow.
Like
yeah.
that was the first
Yeah.
thing that they would say. Not even like, hey, how are you doing? You just had a baby.
Congratulations.
Congratulations on your child. Or how are you feeling? Like none of these like pleasantries of like checking in on me as a new mom. It was all about like, oh, you didn't lose your weight yet, or you still look swollen. What's going on?
Yeah.
And that was like culture shock for me because I'm already trying to like figure out who I am in this new stage of life.
Yeah.
And for everything to be about physical appearance. But now I know 10 years later that Koreans tend to ask about appearance in a way where it's like, I see you,
Oh, yeah.
I care about you,
I
like I
acknowledge
notice
you. Yeah.
this change from before, but it's not in a like beating around the bush kind of way that Americans tend to do. It's so direct that to me I was like, whoa,
Yeah.
like why are you talking about my body and my appearance? To me it was very sensitive, but I guess to Koreans it's not as a sensitive
Yeah,
topic.
I think it's a very nice way to put it because they're not trying to do it in an offensive way. It's just like, I acknowledge you.
Ah.
Like, oh, yeah, exactly how Grace put it. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, so now I think after living here for 10 years, I see that and I feel it. And I was like, oh, this is what they meant. But when you first come here straight out of like America,
Yeah.
it's quite like a stark contrast.
It
of
is.
like,
Yeah.
why are they talking about like me? Like, so I
Yeah.
think that was a huge thing at first. More recently, I think the thing that's hardest to adjust is different parenting styles, cultural context. I think with our kid now, our eldest, he just entered 초등학교 1학년, so he's elementary school, first grade, and Korean public school. I notice the difference of like what parents think their role is as a parent versus how we see our role as a parent, and it's like so different that I'm like at first it was quite an adjustment.
Well, perfect. Thank you for the lead in. Because, no. This is why we wanted to bring you on to talk about today. And this is at the request of many of our followers and listeners as well. We have not really gone deep on parenting and the differences between Korea and America because they are quite stark, I think.
Yeah.
I wanted to intro the topic today.
I'll play the role of how it was back in the days.
Yeah, when you were parented.
Because I'm the one who doesn't have kids here.
Yeah. Before I do that, I just want to, we might cut this out, but Young, I have to say, I think you're an exceptional father and parent and someone I really look up to as a dad and try to aspire to be more like. So I'm really glad to have you on the pod to talk about this. And also, if I would, could say so, a good model for a lot of Korean parents as well, especially Korean dads, to be more involved and to just really, be that present figure in their kids' lives. And Grace, of course, I think again, I know Young better, but I would say you're one of the most intentional parents I've met, and you're always thinking and weighing, okay, like how are my kids developing and the pros and cons of this and that. And so, just very intentional with your parenting as well. And so, I couldn't think of better guests to have on the show to talk about this topic with. So,
we're just always, that's really honored to hear that. But I mean, as a parent, it's the first time for everybody.
Yeah.
So it's a learning process. And I think just being able to share this experience together, I think that's part of growing. So, we are here just to share our experiences too.
So then, why don't you kick us off? Maybe give an overview of your kids as much as you're willing to share, whatever gender, age, etc. And why don't you just lead off with some thoughts about parenting and how it's been so far in Korea?
So we have a son who's 7, and then our second is a daughter. She's almost 4, and then our youngest is a daughter as well, and she is 2. And so all our kids are quite young still, I guess. But we had all 3 of them here in Korea. So I think that's been a unique experience because we're Korean American, but then like all 3 of our children are born and raised in Korea. Actually, all 5 of us were born in Korea. So we have that kind of common experience of identity, I guess, of like having been born in Korea. But I think it's been interesting. Like even for me, I think one of the first things of having had all 3 children here, one experience that I'm lucky enough to have had is having gone to Choriwan all 3 times.
Let's talk about that.
I think that's one of the things that Korea does really well. I know like at times...
Wait, before you move on, what is Choriwan? I don't even know what the translation would be for it. But
Choriwan, it's actually 산후 조리원, so literally postpartum care center. And so it's a place that's, I think, almost very specific to Korean culture. I know postpartum care and recovery is quite common, not just in like Asian countries and cultures, but also African. Like that concept is there, but then the actual like care center, like 조리원, I think is very Korean specific. But it's essentially like a place that you go after giving birth where you have 24/7 care, not just for the baby, but for mom as well. And so, there's packages for massages and like people teach you how to breastfeed and they give you 3 meals and 3 snacks a day. So it's almost like an all-inclusive resort sort of thing, but they have professional like medical staff as well to check on the baby, check on you. So I think that is a very uniquely Korean experience. And I think one thing that I really appreciated about it is when you give birth in America, you're discharged from the hospital and then you're left be on your own. Yeah, it's just like you figure it out, like, and it's a lot to figure out. But here, I think because you are discharged from the hospital, go to the Choriwan, usually anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks. Those first 2 to 3 weeks of a child's life, like, it's a huge adjustment. And just to have somebody around where you can ask, like, oh, why is the baby like doing this or that? Or like, how do I do this? Or even something as simple as they teach you how to bathe the baby. Like, babies can't hold their necks, and like just so many different like little details. And they teach you that, so you feel a lot more equipped.
Yeah. So I mean, as a father, like I didn't know how to wash a baby, a newborn especially, and it's like kind of scary,
They're
right?
so fragile.
I didn't know how to hold the baby, but they actually teach you how to hold it, how to wash it. So it actually trains you as a father, and I think it's good that as a father, I heard whenever you bathe your own kids, they develop this social bond with your kids, so that they actually, as they get older, as an adult, they become more confident and secure in their identity. So that was a really important time. So I still bathe our kids to this day, and I think it's important. It's my responsibility, my role, I guess.
Actually, the Choriwan that we went to for our firstborn, they were very intentional about training the dad.
Okay.
Because you know, like as a mom, you carry the baby in your body for 9 months, and you also nurse them. You have so many other ways of bonding with the child, even before the baby's born, technically. But the dad, it's like the baby all of a sudden one day just appears, and it's like, what do I do with this child, right? So they said, like, this is one way that you can intentionally spend time looking into the baby's eyes and like speaking to them and bathing them and touch, like there's physical touch involved, like all of these things. So I thought it was very like interesting that the Choriwan intentionally.
Such a beautiful process.
It's so beautiful. And like he said, like to this day, the kids are like, they're like, Appa. So to me, I'm like, thank you, Choriwan, because I don't. Typically, I'm not the one that usually bathes them.
But I have a question about the Choriwan thing, and I think this I learned from the internet.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of, I think, speculations within Koreans about why, like, Korean women go to Choriwan, whereas like non-Korean mothers don't, and they're like okay with it. So my question is, do you think there's there's a race thing involved here, or like are like Caucasian or like non-Asian women actually more okay in the postpartum process, or
that they don't need a Choriwan?
Yeah, that's like
I think that's the typical like understanding is that like Korean people say like it's a difference of 체질, right? So they say like, oh, like Caucasian women tend to like be stronger, or like, have like, I don't know, thicker bones, or bone density is different, and so they may be okay with not having the postpartum care. But I think that's actually different from what I've experienced. I think most of the time people don't have access to it, or they don't have knowledge that they're supposed to care for their bodies in certain ways, so they don't, but it ends up actually affecting them later in life. Yeah, and so even just like, I think Korean women, there's a part of it of like caring for your body and trying to bounce back. Like there's a lot of things at Choriwan that they do to help you bounce back. So like losing weight, losing water weight, like retention, like all of that. So I think that might be part of why it's like so ingrained, but also with the idea of like non-Korean women don't need it. I don't know if that's really true. I think they tend to be okay, I guess, for the short term, but then I feel like at some point it might start to affect them and their bodies. There was something else that I wanted to say.
Did you do Choriwan for all 3 kids?
I did. Yeah.
Okay.
It was different lengths of time though.
Yeah.
With the first one, it was 2 weeks. And then for the second, I only went for 1 week. And then the third, I went back for 2 weeks. I was like, this is my last time. Koreans say the last time you go through chori, like 산후조리, is the one that lasts.
I see.
It's like 평생 간다고.
Ah.
Because
Interesting.
the way that you care for your body, because it's almost like as you give birth, your body has an opportunity to reset, they say. And so it's like how you care for it, how you nourish it is what's gonna last. So I was like, I'm going for 2 weeks.
Nice.
I wish my wife were here because we had our first 3 kids in the U.S. and then we had our 4th in Korea, and that was the only time she got to experience the Korean Sano Joriwon. And so I would channel some of the things that I know she would say, but actually, Grace, I think she would have said like she wishes she had that experience after each one.
Yeah, for sure.
Because if you only have, let's say, 2-3 year gap between kids, like it's not that much time to recover, right? And so I think she probably wishes she had that experience throughout all of them. Actually, especially the first one, because like you said, that's when they teach you to breastfeed, how to care for the baby, etc. It's not just about recovery for the mother; it's really educational.
Yeah.
And like again, like for our first 3 kids, we just had to like figure it out on our own. It would have been awesome to have that Joriwon experience.
Yeah.
I think.
I think one thing I remember what I was going to say earlier. One thing is this idea of confinement, I think maybe is what non-Korean women don't necessarily buy into, because I think just the idea of like not leaving the home for the first like however many
100
days.
days, they
It's
say.
supposed to be 100 days, but nowadays like even Korean women
You can't even
they
take
go
shower
out.
after you give birth.
No, but there's been a lot of like change with that. But yeah, the idea of 산후 조리 is to like keep your body warm and to keep indoors to protect your body from like, just like germs and infections and all of these like external factors. I think that might not go down very well for like a non-Korean woman, because it's like after you give birth, I think a lot of people just want to like go back to their normal like life of like going out with a baby. And so that's a huge difference between, I feel like, Americans and Koreans is Koreans do not leave the house with a newborn baby. It's just like common practice. You do not. But then Americans, I've seen like literally like a week old, 2 weeks old baby, and they're like out and about. So
Yeah, I've seen a baby that young on the plane.
yeah. So it's I think that's a huge difference.
Didn't you bring this up once after you had your 4th? Like you really wanted to take her out,
Ah,
but then,
yeah,
like,
yeah,
the
yeah.
Chody one couldn't let you or something?
Well, yeah. Let me respond to some things, and again, channel my wife if she were here. There's a lot to talk about. I think the first story I'll share is maybe a fun one. So actually, for me, I was not allowed to go in as the husband to the Joriwon Center at all. I think it might have been related to COVID precautions at the time. But again, like I don't know, were you able to sleep in the Joriwon and actually stay overnight with the first?
So I think for the first one, yes.
Yeah.
And I felt like it was
pre-COVID.
Yeah, I just
Okay,
felt
it was
like it was
pre-COVID.
stuck there
Yeah.
because it's like 답답해.
Oh, you couldn't leave either.
Yeah.
No,
Once
he
you're-
could. He
but
could.
Oh, you could
I would-
leave.
He
Okay,
left
okay.
and he went to work,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then he would come back. But then starting with our second
Second.
during COVID,
Yeah.
it was like once he left,
I had to like get checked. to
Oh,
come
cold
back
test.
in.
You had to get a
Yeah,
test before coming in.
So I
which
just looked
you
at it from
didn't
the
come in.
outside.
Yeah.
That was hard. Like
That was our very sad experience
Yeah.
in the Jody one. I could like through a window see the
Yeah.
baby, see
Yeah.
my wife. But again, I was taking care of the older kids, so
Yeah.
I kind of had to
That's
be
right.
home too. But the fun story is my wife asked me to smuggle in some Pringles chips for her because she was like, Grace, to your point, a lot of it is recovery for the moms, and I think a lot of the moms want like a strict diet to get their body back, and she's like, they're not feeding me enough. I am breastfeeding. I need food.
Pringles it
Pringles,
is.
yeah.
Did you feel that way though? They were really limiting your food intake at the Jody one?
No,
or?
no. I didn't feel that way.
Okay.
But I did have like supplemental snacks, which I asked Young to bring for
in.
me. Yeah.
I think, Jun, maybe the thing I remember sharing when we talked about this previously, again, we had our first 3 in the US and then only our 4th in Korea. Immediately after birth, I think the entire Korean birthing experience, from my perspective, it's centered around the mother and the mother's recovery and the mother's comfort. And in the US, for example, I think it's mostly about the baby and the baby's health and the baby's basically bond with both parents, right? And the very jarring experience for me was as soon as our baby in Korea was born, the doctors cleaned up all the stuff around it, which, by the way, that's in America, it's seen as like a magical thing that should be kept on the baby as long as possible.
Yeah.
I forgot the exact term, but
Vernix.
yeah, they keep it on as long as possible. In Korea, they wipe it off immediately. And then they take the baby away, like within minutes. We were shocked because in the US, again, the cardinal rule is you don't separate mother and child unless it's absolutely necessary. And when you do, it's for as little time as possible. And if you would like, someone can always accompany the baby, right? That's the whole premise of, I guess, the American birthing experience. But in Korea, again, the nurses were shocked that we wanted to breastfeed the first 24, 48 hours, right? It's like, no, like, we'll bottle feed the baby, like, mom just recover, the baby's in a different room. I think in our birthing unit, we were the only family that was requesting the baby stay with us in our room. And I could tell everyone thought we were crazy. Like, well, that is like a weird American family, right? Like, the mom needs to rest, they need to recover. Why would you want the baby with you, crying, asking for food every 2-3 hours, right? So I think that's the core difference, I would say. Again, I know you guys never had a birth experience in America, but yeah, does that resonate with you? Like, the whole focus is on the mother versus and it's not neglecting the child, to be clear, but the focus is just on helping the mother recover.
Yeah, I think I had to adjust to that idea when I had our first, because I was more under the American idea of like skin to skin after giving birth, and that's sort of how I had envisioned it. But same thing, like, our baby was basically whisked away for all these like checkups and just like making sure that they're okay. And actually with me, it's kind of like a traumatic experience. They didn't bring him back that first day,
right? Yeah, isn't that crazy?
Yeah, the entire day, because they said that as they were doing checks on him, they could kind of hear like fluid in his lungs, and they wanted to monitor him overnight. And for me, I was so upset because I'm also like a first-time mom, and I just gave birth to a baby, and I want to see the baby and bond with the baby, but they take him away, and then they're not bringing him back, and they're saying it's because of medical reasons. But then part of me thinks that those very medical reasons would be resolved if he was just with me. Like, that's sort of what my like mom instinct was saying, but they were not letting me advocate for those things. And so that first day was actually like very hard for me. And even at that point, my mom was saying, it's okay, like, he'll be back tomorrow morning, and then you have the rest of his life. And I was like, interesting. And then that sort of like gave me like food for thought and perspective. And so that first night I actually was able to sleep because I wasn't breastfeeding around the clock. I didn't have a baby like crying in the room. And then the next morning they brought him, and then Young and I were in for a stark awakening because we're like, oh yeah, now.
Send him back.
But yeah, I do think that it's more of like a mother-centric culture here. And then in the States, I think it's baby-centric. And so.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say also in contrast to like including the dad. Because I'll say again, my role in Korea was very different from the US. Again, it was almost comical. Like, I've seen my wife already give birth to 3 kids, but the doctors and nursing staff, they would like shield me away. They're like,
here.
oh, don't look in Korea. And I'm like, I've seen it all before. Oh, don't look. They literally made me walk into the room facing the wall so I couldn't see like,
That's so interesting.
I just thought this was like crazy. And then they were really nervous for me. They were like, don't faint, don't be in shock. I was like, guys, I've seen it before.
Is that a common Korean thing? Like,
I do think so.
Doesn't.
They don't want you to.
So it's really around the mother's comfort.
I think so. Yeah, I think maybe Korean women would also be self-conscious. Sorry, I think American women might be too, but they're just like, I don't know, maybe not as extreme.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think it's a beautiful process.
Right? Yeah, it's a miracle.
It's like, wow, you get to witness this. I mean, she can't see it. I can.
Yeah. Okay, this is not the birthing episode.
I know.
There's so much more we could go into.
Kind of progress.
Just to maybe preview future episodes, right? There's all these superstitions Koreans have. Not superstitions. I don't want to use that word. There's all these
wives' tales.
What's the right word? Traditions, let's just say, that Koreans have in the post-birth experience. We could talk about the prevalence of C-sections in Korea and all sorts of things, but I did want to move on, and because there's so much to talk about with parenting. So I think one of the most stark contrasts I see, having moved from America and parenting there now in Korea, it's how involved, or I would say uninvolved, a lot of the fathers here are. And I don't say this in necessarily a bad way, because, for example, I remember my aunt told me she really feels bad for her husband, right? He's always working, just trying to provide and make money for the family, that he wasn't that involved in their kids' lives. But for whatever reason, I see this all the time. It seems like the moms are doing really 90 and I would say almost 100% of the parenting. Whereas in the US, right, like for sure the moms do more of it. But I think they at least try to be more equal, right? There's like an intention behind, okay, splitting chores, splitting parenting duties, responsibilities, etc. That's the ideal, and we just can't get there for whatever reason. But in Korea, I really feel like the ideal is the mom do 100% of the parenting, and that's seen as like the best way to have a family. But yeah, I wanted to see if that resonates with you or what your thoughts are there.
Yeah, I think even having that 50%, 50%, 100%, that percentage is the wrong beginning, right? I think there are times that, husband need to definitely do more, 80 or 20, it depends on the circumstances, right? So I think even having that percentage breakdown, you have to have 50-50, that's very equal. Then I think in
It's
marriage,
not realistic.
yeah, it's not realistic in marriage and in parenting as well. So, but yeah, I do see a lot of Korean dads. They tend to work longer hours. They don't come home early even to see their kids. They probably already in bed. But for myself, I think I was privileged and blessed enough to be more involved with my kids, even through when they're young. So yeah, that's the only difference, is that you just have to make that intentionally to want to spend time with your children and make that as a priority. I think even at work, I know they ask you to work longer hours, but you just say, I have family. This family comes first. So family focused, family is important. So that's kind of my take on as a husband and as a father.
Sorry, but do you see that? Like, because you work at your work, you get to interface with a lot of Korean fathers and Korean American or American fathers too, right?
Yep.
Do you see any differences in like working schedules or maybe time spent with family between the two cultures?
Yeah, I think definitely for Korean dads, they maybe just because that's how they grew up too in the when they're younger, that their father was always out working and full time working and breadwinner, right? But nowadays it's both of parents work. So, but I think more American families, dads, I think they wanted to get more involved with the children. I think that also to do like a culture of work culture life too, work-life balance. So, yeah, I think that's what I feel. Yeah.
Grace, what's your take on, I guess, any parenting differences and roles and expectations for mothers versus fathers in Korea versus, what you might have expected growing up in the US?
I think, yeah, the father's involvement is definitely a huge thing. Like, when I interact with other moms, like Korean moms, being mainly my children's friends' moms, right? They are all absolutely shocked when they come over. Like, we have people over quite a bit, and we've had play dates at our house. And when they see Young, like, offering, like, oh, can I get you some coffee? Like, like, to us, it's just, like, basic hospitality.
Yeah.
But to them, it's, like, your husband is, like, serving and then he'll, like, go and, like, ring up all the kids and, like, take them outside and play with them. And they're, like, you're just sitting here and, like, drinking your coffee? And I'm, like, yeah, like, what's the big deal? At first, I was, like, I don't understand. But I realized it's because a lot of Korean moms, not only do are they responsible for like Yuga parenting like 95% of the time, a lot of times it's also on the weekends. Like, even when the dad should be around, technically, the dad's off doing his own thing. Yeah. He's like golfing with his buddies, or he's like going out fishing with like coworkers. Like, even the weekends are now about his time. And so then the mom is literally left to do parenting all week long. And so then when they see somebody like him, like intentionally and actually willingly spending time at home with the family, it's quite a shock. So I think that's a huge difference. Another thing that I see in parenting styles that are different is the level of like independence that we give our children versus what Korean parents give their kids. I think for us, naturally, and I'm sure, Dan, you can relate to this, having multiple kids, you cannot do everything for your children. And you don't want to, because it's just burns you out. So I think at a certain point, I'm just like, 알아서 해, 네가. Like, you do it for yourself. Like, go learn to fend for yourself. Go pour yourself a bowl of cereal with milk. Like, I'm not going to make your breakfast every morning kind of thing. And to me, a lot of it is just survival. But I realize in having multiple children, we're also making an environment where kids have to be more autonomous and have to be more independent. Whereas a lot of families here in Korea, the trend is they don't have any children or they have max one. So when you have one, and I can attest to this too, when I only had my son, I wanted to do things for him because I had the ability and I had the time and the energy. And so that's natural desire for parents to want to do those things. But I think naturally, as you have more kids, your ability to do that then goes down. And so I think when they start to use that kind of mentality for everything about the child really doesn't have as much like room to do things and learn to do things on their own. So I feel like that's a huge difference that I see. So us like being comfortable with just like letting them figure things out on their own. Like even on the playground, like our kids will climb the monkey bars, and this is like my 2-year-old too. And I just like let them figure it out because I can't helicopter parent over all of them. But the moms that are sitting next to me that only have one kid, they're like, oh, like, why are you letting your child go up? Like, they might get
So
hurt.
dangerous, yeah.
Like, they have these, like, list of things. But I'm like, I cannot, like.
What do you think resulted that? Because that sounds very, even for me, it sounds very different from when I was growing up. Like, parents wouldn't, like, care for, like, every step of the day that they go through. Like, this is shocking to me that you're describing that moms don't let children go up to like what, like a
Giant bar. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to bring this up too because my wife often tells this story. When she was 4, her grandfather would send her on like a convenience store run. Hey, go pick me up something from the corner market.
Yeah.
As an American, thinking about giving a 4-year-old that is like kind of crazy. And so yeah, June, you said growing up, that doesn't jive necessarily like with
I don't
your
think it was
childhood.
like that at all. Like so there must have been something that has changed over the years, but I'm wondering what it is.
I don't know either. Yeah. What do you guys think has? You guys haven't been living in Korea the whole time, and June, you're not a parent.
I think in some ways it's just the standard of what a parent should do is care for all of their needs. So then it's like trickled down into this idea of like, well, I need to be on top of every aspect of their life. I need to make sure that they're safe. I need to make sure that they're healthy. I need to make sure that they're well educated. Like all of the things, they're starting to see it as their role to manage all of that. And so
And it also reflects
you
as a parent.
yeah,
yes,
I
yes,
think
yeah.
there's a lot
Image
of that in
thing,
Korean culture where it's like your child is a reflection of who you are. It's an extension of you.
Yeah.
And so how they act or how they behave now is reflecting directly upon who you are as a parent. And so it's almost like when I let my kids just roam around, some parents think like I'm being very like irresponsible. Whereas to me, I have a very completely opposite take of it. I'm like, I'm just letting them be kids.
Yeah.
And I'm letting them figure things out on their own. And obviously if they're doing something blatantly dangerous, I will stop them. But sometimes even that line of what's dangerous and what's safe, it's very skewed in one way, I think, for Korean parents because they have the ability to.
Yeah, I think parenthood that we think is our kids are just our guest for temporary. I want as they grow up, they want to be independent. They're gonna be their own person and people. So, but I think Korea, just my take is that they want to kind of control their step, like what they want, what you have to do. This is how you do, and that also comes with the society. Everyone's doing this, so I must do this as well.
I will say, two things. One, I would describe what you're calling, I think we call it overparenting. That's happening in the US too, for sure. That's the trend, right? I remember growing up, I've shared this story before, even when I was 7 or 8, I'd be bike riding miles away, right? My parents had no clue where I was. I just had to be home by sundown. Again, the thought even in America of doing that today is kind of like, oh, that's irresponsible. Cops will like call police if they see a kid by themselves, no matter how old they are, right? So I think this idea of over-parenting and the parents having to do everything for their kids, that's maybe a worldwide phenomenon.
That's true.
The thing that comes to mind though is what you said. In America, I really feel like the parents see their job and goal as to like help their kids become independent people, maybe as soon as possible. Right. I think a lot of this is changing with housing costs, but a lot of Americans, you know, in our generation, they'd be out of the house by 18, go to
Yeah.
college, and never come back. They never live with their parents after that, right? And as we know, these multi-generational households in Korea are much more common. I think Korean traditionally you don't leave the house until you get married.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So you could be 30, 35
right.
still living with your
Yeah.
parents. And so there's less this focus on like helping them
Independence,
exactly
yeah.
become independent. And then the other side of this though is something interesting you said, Grace, or Young, I forget. We see, I think Koreans and maybe Asian families see their kids as a reflection and extension of themselves. And I don't know where I got this from again, because I was born and raised in the US, but I remember this very specific moment. I think my first child was 2 years old. He was struggling with a puzzle, right? I was like, just get the edge pieces together. He just didn't understand, right? But this is normal for a 2-year-old, to be clear. And I remember talking with my therapist. I was like, why is this irrational anger and frustration coming from inside? Like, why can't my kid do this puzzle that I know he shouldn't be able to do? Where is this from? And I just remember like this breakthrough moment. She was like, my therapist was like, you know, your kids are not an extension of you. If your kid can't do that puzzle, it doesn't make you a bad parent. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean you're dumb. It doesn't mean your kid's dumb. You
Yeah.
told me yourself, Daniel.
Yeah.
Just developmentally, they shouldn't be able to do it. So why are you getting so frustrated? And anyway, I still remember that moment. It was a big breakthrough for me. But I wonder, I love June and your thoughts on this, like kids as an extension of their parents.
I kind of want to play devil's advocate here because like I haven't done parenting myself, but I kind of could get that through my relationship with my parents as well, because I sometimes feel like my parents are an extension of me too. And I think it's so natural because
Interesting.
like we share DNA, we kind of look similar, and like I have a lot of traits that my parents have. So I think a lot of the times when I'm having like arguments with my parents, it's those are things like if someone else's see it, it's such a like menial thing that why are you like so pissed off about this? But it's like the things that is so intrinsic inside of you that triggers that, right?
Yeah.
So in that sense, I feel like there's a natural thing where I mean, it's only natural to me that you feel like your child is an extension of you, but like for you to like sort of counter that almost feels unnatural to me.
Interesting.
Yeah.
No, it's true because even like in our day-to-day interactions, like Young and I will always say like, oh, when we see certain characteristics of our children, we're like, oh, that's you.
It's
Yeah.
coming
Oh, that's
from us.
me.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
and
Exactly.
it's like so like
Innate.
innate to just do that because obviously like they are products of us, right? And so it makes sense. But I think we're always like conscious of that because I'm like, yes, they may have certain characteristics that are very much me and then some that are very much him. But as a whole, they are their own being, right? And I think that's something consciously we always have to like remind ourselves of because I feel too like the smallest thing that my son will do, if I see that same behavior or tendency within me, it's triggering.
Yeah.
Because I'm like that and I know what happened to me when I acted in this way. I like almost want to prevent him to have to go that same route. But he's also his own self. So there's no guarantee that he's gonna go down the same path as me. But it's almost like because it's triggering, I like feel like it's my role to like stop that. But he has to learn it in his own time, in his own way. So yeah, I do agree with what you're saying, June, of like it's almost intrinsic to see each other as reflections of one another. But I think being conscious of that and trying to work against that takes a lot of work, but I think it's meaningful work because at the end of the day, they are their own beings, right?
Wait, that one thing you said, I think, really did not resonate with me. I think it's fascinating, and I
Yeah.
wanted to get your takes on this because I don't see my parents as an extension of me at all. Of course, when I see them do things like that I see myself doing, it's like, oh, that's, of course, we're related in that way, right? But, you know, I don't think of them as an extension of me, right? Like,
Maybe
It's
that's the
just
more
shocking.
American side of
I
you.
don't know, like, well, how do you guys think when
When he said that, I was actually surprised that I actually resonated with that.
it did?
Yeah.
So you see, I don't know, what's an example of this? if your parents are doing something like, let's say, I don't know, what's a good, sorry, maybe you guys can give me an example. Like, what's the situation where you would see your parents do something or whatever, and it's like you feel like you're doing it, or it's like an extension of yourself?
Yeah, I have a very good example.
Okay.
So I think this is we share similar traits in this, Daniel.
Yeah.
But like if I have food in front of me, I cannot not empty it, right?
Yeah.
And I see that in my mom a lot, which I don't like. And
Yeah.
then the reason why I really don't like it is because I think that I feel like I have it in me too.
Yeah.
And in that sense, like there's an extension, like there's a connection there. Maybe it's like a innate like DNA thing, or maybe
Yeah.
it's like the way that she parented me.
Yeah.
But like that's like one part of me that I don't like about myself. And when I see my mom do it and I understand the origins of where it came from,
Yeah.
like it really triggers me.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I agree. We've talked about this
Yeah.
before. I can't leave food on my plate. Again, maybe a part of me is like, I wish my parents didn't raise me this way with such a scarcity mindset. Of course, balancing that with understanding how they grew up and where they're coming from. But I feel no responsibility over my parents, and I think that's what I mean. Like, they're not going to change. I don't feel like it's my job to help them change or maybe see a different way. So I feel maybe that's it. I'm wondering, do you feel a responsibility over your parents? Because I really don't. Like they're their own people. I have no control.
So like for an instance, like even within the marriage of our parents, like there are times where they have conflicts, right?
Sure.
And that's just natural. When my parents are going through a conflict, even now as a grown adult, it stresses me out. And I realize it's because I'm still a child in this dynamic. And like I see it with my own kids too. Like when we're arguing, it stresses our kids out because they see themselves as a reflection of their parents, right? As a product of their parents. And when your parents are arguing, to them they're thinking like worst case scenario, right? And I feel like even as a grown adult, like even to this day, sometimes when my parents call me and say like, oh, like, you know, your father and I, I have to consciously say, they need to work that out. It's between them. But my inclination is to really get stressed and like
Try to
feel
resolve it.
responsible for it in some way. Like as if it's my job to like diffuse the situation or help them talk it through or something. I don't know. And I don't know if that's maybe more of like a firstborn thing that I have.
I was gonna bring that up, but June, I know you're Mangne like I am. Yeah.
So I'm different in that I don't feel responsibility towards my parents.
Okay.
I just feel like, oh, whatever I have it in me that I don't like originated from there.
Oh, that. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
so
Okay.
it's
That
more
I
of
agree
like
with.
I feel embarrassed to say this. It's more of like a blame thing than a responsibility thing.
Okay.
I'm being like super
Yeah.
transparent here.
Yeah.
Shame culture. or something.
Yeah. Interesting. Young, do you feel like you have do you feel like your parents are an extension of you, and do you feel a responsibility towards them?
I think I'm kind of like you, Dan. Where I just feel very independent.
Yeah.
I mean, it's their life that they're living, but I mean, it says, fruit doesn't fall from the tree.
Far
right?
from tree, yeah.
So I do have a certain trace from them, but it's not like my responsibility to like resolve their issue. I mean, I check in their health and stuff, but other than that, like, we're kind of I have my own family here.
Yeah.
So I don't feel like I had to like take care of their needs and this responsibility of. So I feel like there's
I'm
independence.
surprised.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's
I'm
like
more
a
American now.
yeah, it's like a filial piety. It's like Confucian
filial
value,
piety, yeah,
right?
Confucian value,
So respect and taking care of your elders.
Yeah.
Again, I think it's a good thing to do. Again, I try to be a good son, talk to them, etc. But I really, just when you say your parents are an extension of yourself or having a responsibility towards them, I don't feel that. Yeah.
It's interesting, yeah.
Okay. How about, we talked a bit about this, Grace. I wanted your take, Young and Grace, as well, because I've said this on the pod before, discipline. So when it comes to modern Koreans, and June, I'd love to get your thoughts on Korea before, but what the parents' role in disciplining their kids, how, just, does anything come up when you hear that?
I mean, I grew up so when I was, in elementary school, I remember
Corporal
corporal punishment was big. So, I mean...
Like physical spanking,
yeah.
right?
So teacher would have a ruler stick, and then there's a method of getting hit too. Like you can't go like that hurts. So you have to actually put your palm out, and then as it hit, you gotta kind of reduce the impact by pulling your hand down.
Yeah.
So you learn all these tricks, but I feel like corporal punishment was kind of big when I was growing up. And
Sorry, not just in schools, but at home too?
home, I think I was like 혼내, meme stick, whereas meme stick, like,
Yeah.
you know, they will ask you to bring it and then
Yeah.
they will do the my mom would, so one time my mom would do like the self-infliction of punishment. Like, hey, I'm gonna, you know, you got, because I didn't raise you well, I'm
Oh,
gonna
she
hit
hits
myself.
herself.
But that worked
Wow.
on me well because I think
Yeah.
she knew that will work on me. That's one time thing. Right?
I've never heard that before.
Yeah,
Is this
so-
common in Korean culture?
No,
So,
I don't think so.
I've never heard
Yeah,
this
so
before.
she kind of like, I guess that's
It's like
psychological.
deep guilt.
Yeah. Yeah,
Really, it's
so
really deep
once
guilt.
she
Yeah.
did that, I was like, I'll never do it
Oh,
again.
wow.
But that was kind of my experience. I wasn't really like 혼내 all the time,
Uh-huh.
but that was my memory too.
Okay.
Yeah. So for now, I don't think we don't. We don't hit the kids, but we more verbally try to explain to them, try to teach them, or give them a timeout. But I don't know how.
Yeah, I'm not
Discipline.
sure how like Korean parents typically discipline. I feel like it's very extreme. It's like not disciplining or like it swings the opposite
0
way.
to 100, it
Yeah,
ramps up
yeah,
quick.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Whereas I feel like we try to like explain it to the kid in a way that like they can understand. But I also realize like, you know, when kids tantrum, which they'll naturally tantrum, like that's not really the place to then explain to them and give them like a long spiel about what they did wrong.
Yeah.
So I've learned, especially through reading a lot of parenting books, like when they're actually able to receive those messages. And so I think that's something I try to do. But truthfully, like, you know how it is with multiple kids, like especially in the mornings, that's when I like lose it because it's just so much going on. But I do think when it comes to discipline and parenting and like inevitably making mistakes along the way, something that like I talk to Young a lot about is this idea of rupture and repair. And so in psychology and counseling, you talk about inevitably with any relationship, there's ruptures. There's things that go wrong. There's divides. There's hurt. But I think it's especially important repairing that. And so making a conscious effort as the adult to go to your child and say, hey, mommy messed up. Like I shouldn't have raised my voice, but I was really frustrated about this. Next time I'll try to do better. I'm sure I hurt your feelings. I apologize that, you know, I love you. Like, and making that extension of like reconciliation. I think that's something typically like our generation, we didn't grow up with. Like our parents didn't really know to do that. And so it was like rupture. And then it's like, okay, 와서 밥 먹어. Like, or, you know, like something, you know what I mean? And then it's just like this underlying tone of like, well, now it's over, let's move on.
Yeah, yeah.
Brush it under the rug kind of thing. But then as a child, it's like, wait, what just happened? Why did they get upset? Like, why was I so upset? What are these feelings like? And not having a space to kind of process that. But I think with a lot of like, kind of self-reflection, I realized like our kids really need that. And so I know like even Young too, like he'll always go to the kids and say like, you know, daddy did this, I'm sorry.
Sometimes you have to admit that you know
We're not perfect,
we're
yeah.
not perfect too as a human beings. But I think most importantly, I think as parents, we have to be on the same page when we discipline. Like you can't just have one parent's, you know, all the time angry, but just being able to listen to them both. But it's really hard, you know, like at that moment you just want to like easy ways, just maybe 혼내 or just discipline them there right at the moment. But you gotta kind of let them tantrum out, just let them be, let them express their feelings, and then after when they're calm, just have that conversation.
One thing I was trying to get at though is, do you see any differences in discipline, let's say thresholds or methodologies or whatever, between you guys and maybe more Korean parents? And again, I think this idea that your kids are an extension of yourself, when they do poorly, it reflects on you and your parenting style. I think that's more deeply ingrained in Korean society than it is in American society.
Yeah.
Again, we're trying to raise our kids to become their own independent people.
Yeah.
We recognize they're different than we are. You know, they're not the exact same and whatever. But I'm really like leading you guys because this is something I've seen, and I'm wondering if you see it as well.
I think it's extreme. Like,
Okay.
I think actually recently I heard about a family where they had basically like hit the child and it like left a mark and there was like a report and somebody came to kind of investigate, because, you know, now it's not okay. Like, even hitting your own child, like, it's not kosher anymore. But I was surprised that they were not aware of that. So it's like, it's my child. I should be able to discipline them in whatever way I see fit. Why is somebody coming to investigate the situation? Yeah. And I almost had to like...
So like child abuse, right? In Korea.
Yeah, exactly. I almost had to like educate them and say like, well, at least in America, like if you work as a school employee, public school employee, you're like a mandated reporter.
Yes, you're
if you
required to report it. Yeah.
Find out about any information, or even if it's hearsay, you still are required to report that. And I think now in Korea it's similar. So if a child comes to school and has like a mark on their arm and they are asked about it and they say, oh, well, like, you know, my mom or my dad hit me. Now like school employees have to find out about it. So I realized like this idea of like going from 0 to 100, it's like, I see it a lot, even in like public spaces. So I'm like, oh, this idea of like controlling your child's behavior, especially where other people can see it.
Yes, exactly.
Seems to be a big thing.
In Korea, right?
Yeah.
Because you brought up the case on the playground, which is something I see a lot too. It's like you're maybe letting your kid do their own thing on the playground, maybe even, I don't know, be more independent. Whereas, like, I think Korean parents might really, like, yell at them, like, hey, don't do that, or blah, 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 right? Yeah. I don't know if you're approaching it more from, like, a risk-taking thing, like, let them learn to manage their own risks.
But what's really interesting to me is that there are a lot of, I think, public criticisms towards, like, modern Korean parents. Just let kids do whatever they want in, like, restaurants and cafes.
So that's why it's, like, it swings back and forth. I don't think there's consistency, and I think that's the difference that I see. Is, like... At least for us, I feel like we try to be consistent. I think that's a huge thing. Like whether it be at home or outside of the home, out in public, like the same rules should apply. Not because we're here and we see you, but because that's right. But I think when kids are disciplined in a way where when the parent is around, it's like, going off on it. When a parent's not around, what do you think a kid's gonna do? They're obviously gonna try to like, you know, finagle and figure out ways that they can get away with things. And so even just this idea of like very permissive and lax parenting sometimes, but then in front of other people, it's like, no, coming down hard with an iron fist. The kid's like, what's going on? Like, what is supposed to be the way that I behave? And so I think that's maybe the thing that I see is the inconsistency.
And specifically when it's in front of others, that could be there to judge you versus maybe in the privacy of your home.
It's a trigger maybe. And it is to me too.
Of course, yes, me
like,
too.
Especially when I see my kids like getting involved with other kids and then I don't know how their parents are going to react. I'm like kind of tense, but then I realize like they need to figure it out on their own. I take a deep breath and I just like kind of let them figure it out. And usually it'll like be fine. But I think parents think that they need to get involved in certain areas and then are completely hands off in other areas. And I wonder what the kind of message it's giving the kids.
Can I ask you a follow-up question? Is there anything about like Korean parenting culture that you wish that America would adopt?
I think just to say, because I grew up here in Korea too, both my parents, they're just sacrificial heart. Something that, you know, for their kids. I mean, I have no doubt that their love for me is different ways that they don't express it maybe in like verbally, but through their service and through their actions, I think that says a lot. So for me, it's there. But I think it's kind of like survival sacrificial, like level to the like, you know, I have to, 진짜 this is precious kid that there's just like extra level. I just feel like that's like almost like
I think it's like, because most of us like immigrated, like, and so like just the natural like idea of moving to a different country to give your child better opportunities than you had,
that shows
that
something.
Already your starting point of like sacrifice is next level, right? Like the willingness of like literally taking your entire life, picking it and like bringing your family somewhere else. I think that is maybe the next level like part of it.
Young, I definitely know what you're saying because when I think about my parents, specifically my dad, the way I describe him, hardworking, self-sacrificial, never, prioritizing his needs or
Never
wants,
complain.
never complaining once, right? Except about us. Or my mom. But anyway, I know my kids aren't gonna say that about me, right? Because we didn't come from, let's say, nothing, right? Because of my parents and their sacrifice, we started off, here instead of at the bottom. So I do agree. I do wish we could instill that in my kids, our kids, but I just know that I believe they're not gonna have it, right?
I thought of something. I
Yeah.
think maybe this is more like when like you grew up in Korea, but this idea of it taking a village to raise a kid.
Yes, I love that. Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one.
I think Korea, at least back in the days,
Yeah.
used to be like, the 응답하라 1988, right?
Yeah, I
Like
was
that
gonna say,
idea
yeah.
of like the entire town and the village and the people, like the imo and samchun들 down the street, like that kind of thing. I think in some ways we're trying to replicate it the best that we can. And here, because I have my parents here and they're very far away, like Korean standards, 3.5 hours away. So it's quite far. But just for me, like having grown up as an immigrant child, I didn't have grandparents around, right? Because they lived in Korea. And so for me, I think my kids are so blessed in that they have grandparents that are present and involved in their lives. And this idea of like multi-generational like living, they're able to be loved on so much just by the sheer like presence of a grandparent, right?
Yeah.
And so that idea of like Korean parenting culture, I think is amazing. And
Yeah.
like I don't think we would necessarily have it if we were still in the States.
Those are both good. Yeah. So not only relying on the support of your maybe neighbors or friends, but also your, grandparents being involved.
Also church. Like we go to church, and I think when we go to church, Young and I are very like involved, and so oftentimes we just kind of have to let our kids like fend for themselves. But they always have like 교회 누나들, 언니들, 오빠들 taking care of them, and then even 이모 삼촌들. And so this idea of like once you're in church, like you're taken care of. Like there are people that have their eyes and they're watching and they're caring for you. So I know like that's an extension of our like village, right? Of raising the community.
All right, I want to switch gears just a little bit, but I wanted to get your thoughts on education and the educational system in Korea and maybe some of the differences between Korea and America. And so, yeah, I mean, I know you guys are very intentionally sending your oldest kid to Korean school. My wife and I had that thought as well for our older ones, but they are going to international, more of an American style school. And our younger two are going to the Korean system, but again, it's daycare and pre-K, so it's not the same, I think. But yeah, just curious, what are your thoughts on the Korean education system, especially I guess elementary school right now?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up here again. I went to the elementary school here, so I have a really good memory actually when I was in elementary school. Like just being able to have that like rigorous kind of academic standard and that discipline to able to like to learn and to be challenged in that level. I think it's great. Yeah, I think it's a good experience for me overall. So
So
that's
did
what I
that
wanna-
have to do with
for sending our first
Yeah.
to Korean school because people are asking me like, hey, you guys are American, well, why don't you send your kid to international school? But because I had such a good memory in Korea, I just want them to experience the same thing.
And would you say so far what your first grader is going through, does it mimic what you remember your elementary school experience was like?
Yeah, so for me, like growing up, like the school field is like you could play, run around. There's like place to and so for my firstborn son, his school is like filled with the field grass. So that experience is like really amazing. So we also live in not in the city. So we have a school that is like behind there's a mountain, there's a field. So that experience I also had when I was a little growing up. So I think that's really nice. And also the school that I think I grew up to, they teach a lot about like character, and I think like you have to be a good person, 인성. So that's what they teach at this school because this school was founded in like 1930s. So it's really old school in where we live. So I think they continue to teach them not to be academically focused, but also that you have to be a good person, like your character. So I think that those parts of having our son to go to that school is really nice.
Yeah.
So social-emotional development is the focus so far.
But honestly, like
Here comes.
I don't know. I don't think that was our intention starting off. Like we found out that this school has a lot of like 인성 교육, like character development education, after we already put him in. So it just so happened to like work in our favor. But I think intentionally when we first decided to send him to Korean school was, hey, we're living here in Korea. You were born here. You should know the language. And you should know the culture and you should know the history. And I did not feel as qualified to teach him the Korean language and the culture and the history. And so I felt like he should get that from school, and we can supplement him at home with the American side of the education, like speaking English at home, and giving him opportunities to be more like creative or critical thinking, like that type of thing that I usually think is more like American.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to kind of give him the best of both worlds, but because I didn't grow up going to school in in Korea, I felt like he should get that from Korean school. And so that had originally been why we decided to send him to Korean public school. But truthfully, and this is where I think him going to Korean school really helped me, is a big difference between American elementary schools and Korean elementary schools is I feel like American elementary schools are very warm and fuzzy. Like teachers are very kind. They like give hugs and like, I don't know, just like the cozy vibes of like rug time and like morning meetings. And I used to teach in these types of settings. So it's like there's a certain tone of voice that you use, and like you have story time and like, what is it? You like show and tell and all these things. When I first sent my kid to 일반 초등학교, I was so shocked because it felt like military.
Really? Wait,
Yeah.
I'm shocked. Yeah, I expected Korean elementary schools to be like...
Me too.
Yeah.
And I thought like
What?
because we live more like in the 시골 and it's the 시골학교 and there's
Even
like
more so,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
I thought like there's fewer kids and it's like more homey, but I think it also really depends on the teacher.
Of
And
course.
so
yeah.
I think my son's teacher is very sort of like strict, and she has like a rigid sort of like restrictions and rules and regulations and all of that. And so at first I was like, this is not the vibe of school that I wanted my son's first educational experience to be. But he was like not really shocked because he's like, this is just
What it's
Korean
supposed to be
school.
like.
Yeah, this
Interesting.
is the way it is. So he almost like kind of normalized it for me.
Yeah.
But then now in hindsight, I actually think it's not a bad experience for my son because his teacher is very strict. The other first grade teacher is very lax. So she's technically the more like American, like warm and fuzzy, like angel, like sort of feel.
Yeah.
The kids are running amok in that class.
Yeah.
They are like out of control, they say. Or as I hear from the fellow moms. And so in the Korean setting, maybe the very like almost militaristic rules and regulations, that type of teacher early on is necessary to set the tone for, hey, school is important, education is important, this is how you need to act in a school. I don't know. That's sort of been my experience, but I don't know if it's across the board the same.
So you think there's a general affinity towards those kind of teachers amongst the parents?
I think so.
Oh, interesting.
Because when you don't, and going back to this idea of like parenting styles of like Korean parents maybe at times with just one kid tend to be more permissive. I think permissive parenting oftentimes goes into like entitlement of the kids, right? Like, I'm let to do whatever I want at home. Why are you telling me what to do here? And so if they don't kind of like lay down the law in the beginning, it's like kids kind of just don't have control, I guess.
And this is in contrast, your two younger kids are in the daycare and kindergarten system, right? 어린이집 유치원. So you're saying 어린이집 유치원, all about the warm, fuzzy feelings.
Warm and fuzzies. Yeah.
Super nurturing, caring, soft.
For sure.
And then in first grade, that's
It
when school
changes.
starts.
Yeah.
Interesting.
To
Jun,
me,
is this-
you know
yeah.
what? When it really starts feeling serious
I
is when
remember.
you go to
Middle
school?
Middle school.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
That's what I wanted to bring up because June, previous conversation, you had mentioned elementary school is all fun and games in Korea, and then sixth grade, like middle school, is when it starts, right?
It's just like night and day.
Yeah.
It's so different because like The biggest difference for me is that number one, you can't wear whatever you want. You have to wear a school uniform.
That's right.
Oh,
Number
sorry.
Yeah.
yeah, number two, you have to cut your hair.
Mm.
So you can't
Whoa,
have
what?
Yeah.
So there's like so
It is
many.
military.
It is military, right? And the way that the teachers treat you is very different.
Okay.
So it's like it's very night and day again. So it's I think I can still remember my first day at middle school. It was just so shocking.
Does anyone know if this is still true in modern Korea? Does middle school have like hair requirements?
I don't think
Yeah.
they have hair requirements.
Okay,
Uniform.
but uniform's still a thing.
I think uniform is still a thing, and I think the idea of education, like academics, picking up in middle school is still a thing.
I think.
So, like across the board, I think the consensus was when we would tell people, "Hey, we're thinking about sending our kid to Korean elementary school. What do you think?" Everyone that I spoke to was like, "Yeah, up until elementary, I think is fine."
I see.
It was like everyone saying like middle school is when it starts to really kick into high gear. And so I thought that that was interesting too. But I guess for me, having grown up in the American education system, even the 어린이집 유치원 to elementary shift was still like significant. But I've heard that a lot of it has to do with the teacher and their teaching style. So
I just wonder, right? Because I think anyone would say modern Korea is more competitive than it was 30 years ago. If that like rigorous educational, academic mindset has just been pushed down from 6th grade, even all the way down to 1st. Right?
But you know what's interesting is they don't actually learn a lot right now. So academic wise, it's very basic.
I see.
So they were going through like Hanadara and stuff. And even like right now it's
ABCs in Korea.
tosim, so it's like adding and subtracting.
For 1st grade, that's on level. That's like
Right, but here I am thinking Korean, like 수학, like really
Oh, yeah,
intense,
yeah.
like 국어, like, but it's very slow pace. But that's the thing. I've heard that 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade, very slow.
then it
And then it hits and picks up in like 4th.
Maybe that's
again.
why I liked it, because I never had to.
It's because you left when it was picking
Before
up.
it got hard. Yeah. No, but Grace, I've heard similar advice. Basically, the Korean elementary school might be great, but everyone has so much trauma from middle school and high school, how competitive it is, that long hours spent studying for the entrance exam, etc. That they're like, we highly discourage. Well, that might be too strong. Think long and hard before sending your kids to Korean middle school and high school, but elementary school should be okay. Yeah.
I think there's a differentiation in word classification even within elementary, because there's a word called 저학년, there's a word called 고학년.
Yeah.
I think 고학년 starts from 4th grade.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's
I
right.
So I
see.
think there's a split difference
Divide,
in mentality.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because,
even just the
wow.
speed or the pace of academics.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I keep hearing like 초등학교 저학년, like lower elementary
I see.
school.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it changes.
But then when I went to the States at 4th grade, like even the math level was like for kids, like they're like, oh my god, this guy's amazing.
Yeah, so you were way more advanced in
Advanced
Korea,
in Korea.
than when you moved to
Yeah,
America.
so
I see.
that's why I think for me that rote memorization, everything like multiplication we used to memorize in the 구구단,
Yeah.
things like that. Like it was kind of still stuck in my head, So
All right, Young, you touched on something, so let's go there. You said rote memorization, which I think is at least the reputation of education in Korea.
Yeah.
It's just repetition. Versus, let's say in America, right, love of learning, right,
Yeah.
creativity, right, initiative,
Yeah.
things like that. Yeah, I mean, how has your experience been? And again, Jun, I think you have the most education in Korea. Yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
I don't know. I don't think I had enough. Oh, maybe I did. Sorry. So the strict difference that I realized when I went to American grad school is how students ask questions. And in Korea, it's almost like
You don't.
a protocol. The teacher asks any questions and no one just
Yeah.
says
you
anything.
don't challenge.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's like
Wait, you
All
don't
the ti-
answer?
No,
What do you
it's
mean?
like, do you have any questions? And then
Oh.
you asking a question is almost like taboo.
Is that true?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like
It's a
don't challenge
rhetorical.
teacher.
It's a
Yeah.
rhetorical question.
But then I realized in American schools, people ask, I mean, I think 90% of them are dumb questions. Like there are like 10% of questions that are really good.
Yeah.
That like really makes you think.
Uh-huh.
That is an extension of what we learned in
Okay.
that class, which I thought was really good.
Uh-huh.
But like Korean, But that was really shocking to me because they actually ask questions,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
You can admit you don't understand what they taught, right? Is that it?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
I see.
So, yeah, I'd love to get your thoughts on that because, like, Grace, you didn't have any like education experience in Korea, but maybe Young, even when you were like 저학년, maybe 저학년 elementary
Yeah.
school, they do ask questions, right?
Why is the sky blue?
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
I mean, I think like 받아쓰기 and stuff used to like everyone to like repeat it, so you had to write it. And I just thought that was just part of because everyone's doing it. So I think it's just we just learn to just keep practicing. It's a repetitive practice, so that helped to like ingrain. They say like to memorize a word or something, you have to do 7 times. So I think that kind of education was very helpful. So even I took that into like my American education where now studying for like SATs, I just look at the words like multiple times, like very kind of disciplined way. And when I first tried to learn English vocabulary, like I used to carry like dictionary around just to kind of look around what the words are over and over again.
So
Like,
Korean.
That has to
Yeah.
be a Korean thing, right?
Yeah.
No way American parents are like, read the dictionary.
No.
Yeah, I would just read the dictionary to learn
Literally, my
language.
dad told me that all the time.
I did?
You're bored? Read the dictionary.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's like,
Oh,
Dad, that's
that's
literally
great
the
then.
definition of
Yeah.
boring.
Yeah.
But I do think it's just a different style, different method of learning things, right? There are certain things that you just have to memorize, right?
Yeah.
You can't understand anything. Some things you just have to memorize.
Yeah.
Some things you have to think creatively and
Yeah.
really digest it to become yours. So I think sometimes like the word that Korean people often use to degrade Korean education system is like 주입식 교육 or like 암기식 교육.
Yeah.
주입식 means like it's like sort of how do you say it, like infused and like forced to you.
Forceful, enforced, yeah.
Enforced
I see.
education.
Yeah.
And then 암기식 is just memorized. I think it's just a tool, different tools for you to learn different things, right? You can't always be creative in everything that you learn, right? So I think if you just understand those are different tools of understanding the world and just mix it in different areas of learning, I think that's the best.
Yeah. I think
Holistic way.
that's how we see it. So like when I first went to these like 참여 수업, so like they invite parents to come and like participate and see what's going on in the classroom. I was really shocked because of this idea of like repetitive, like same thing over and over and over again. And truthfully, even as a grown adult, I was like, this is so boring. Like, why does she have to say the same thing like 10 times? And why are we like this constant like emphasis of rote learning?
Yeah.
Which I know is a thing here in Korea, like amgi, right? But I was a little bit discouraged because that's not how I grew up, and that's not the maybe tone of learning that I wanted to set for my son. But I realized there is a strength to it, and there will come a time where that's necessary. I think especially with math, right? Like sometimes you cannot sit and think 3 + 1. Like you just need to know 3 + 1 is 4.
Yeah.
Like, and in order to move on to next level mathematical thinking, there needs to be a lot of the rote learning, right? And I think that's where Korea is strong. But in areas that maybe is not as strong, I realized like we can sort of supplement that at home. So this idea of like asking critical questions or like creative thinking or outside of the box thinking, like those are things that we want to be more intentional about giving our children at home so that they can be well balanced, right? That it's not just the teacher says this is right, therefore it is right, but it's like, well, what do you think about it? What's another way of solving that problem? Or like, how would you like, think about this? So
Jun, do you think that idea of trying to reinforce the rote memorization and repetitive exercises with, higher level thinking, critical thinking, etc. at home, would that resonate with Korean parents, or would that be seen as kind of like a foreign concept?
I don't know. I don't know how modern Korean parents educate their children, but I do feel like, because there were so many criticisms towards the Korean way of education, so I think they're trying to be more creative, and I think like in public schools too, I feel like it's going to be very different from how I received education. So I think now maybe Korea is in a pretty, like they're probably finding a balance, right? So like I think I resonate with what Grace said. Like 3+1, you just have to memorize it, or like the 구구단, you just have to memorize it.
What's 구구단?
Multiplication.
Oh, I have a
Yeah.
good story about that. Yeah.
And after you understand that, and you have this tool to just quickly calculate things,
Yeah.
maybe later on, if you have like higher math education, now you start to understand what it was, right? Like in retrospect,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think that's also a good way of like learning things.
I can share two stories about that. One, June, we were at our previous employee company. We're at like a meeting with the whole company. And the person the speaker was giving an example, and she just said 4 in Korean. And the whole room went 16
Yeah.
in unison, right? Out of nowhere. They weren't like prepping multiplication tables, but the whole room said 16. And I was like, what just happened, right?
Oh.
But it recalled for me, like, that's how my dad taught me the times tables. But it was, I'm pretty sure in America, if a random speaker went in front of a group of people and
Yeah,
said
not-
4, the room wouldn't in unison respond
Yeah,
16,
yeah.
right? But the second good example is, my kid's in third grade, my oldest, or he just graduated third grade. And yeah, at the beginning of the year, I was like, hey, you're going to learn times tables. We're going to teach you. And I was trying to teach him, but I wasn't like doing like the military style, right?
With
And
the song.
I don't know the song,
Yeah,
but
there was a song.
Anyway, like he's almost through third grade, and I realized he doesn't have it memorized yet. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you gotta have it memorized, because it was starting to impact him. It was holding him back, right, from 2-digit multiplication, all these things. And anyway, so my wife and I, we hired, and this is a good segue into the next topic. We hired a private tutor, just like 15 minutes a week, but just giving him exercises. And at first, when the teacher gave him these books, it was so much. Like, it's literally hundreds of problems of the same kind. And I'm like, this feels like a waste of time. Like, I feel so bad for him. He's complaining, but like, he needs to do it. And I will just say, like, it's dramatically improved his math. Like, before where I was trying to teach him like multiplication. Oh, well, imagine a square and you like line them up. This is what you're calculating, like all the theory and concepts behind math. Because I love math. Turns out the most effective thing for improving his math, he just needs to do hundreds of these
memorize them.
problems.
Yeah.
And anyway, like, just agreeing with you that this balance and blending of the two, I think higher level conceptual abstract thinking with just kind of rote memorization and putting in the reps is gonna lead to very good outcomes, I think.
Yeah, like also learning a new language is kind of like that too, right? You can't like understand every like origin of the vocabulary. Like, it's like you just have to first start memorizing things, and maybe later you have a deeper understanding. Oh, maybe this is how this word was formed.
Well, not for the pod, but math and language are actually both, I think, is it left brain activity. So we should bring up a right one, which is more creativity to balance. But anyway, I think rote memorization is really, really good for those left brain activities. But the right brain ones are the ones that might be weaker. Anyway.
I have another gripe with American education, maybe.
Bring it.
So the thing that I was most frustrated about in like these very, inclusive, everyone has to say something kind of education is that it's nothing is like, I can't expect anything, right? Like for instance, like the first class, I want to sometime maybe in my Korean mind, I want to learn what the professor has to say and like the thing that I have to learn that day. But like it always like turns to a different direction because people are asking these questions, and I feel like, oh, maybe I had to learn like, let's say 100% and I only could cover 30.
Because students are bringing up their own like individual
and
needs.
again, in my mind, I thought 90% was dumb questions, something that if you just like study on your own, you can just get answers with. That was my frustration of American education.
No, I mean, you're bringing up the most recurring theme on this pod, which is collectivism versus individualism. In an American classroom, individuals are almost encouraged to share their needs. Whereas in your mind, you're like, wow, that kid's wasting everyone else in this classroom's time for that one person's needs.
Like, should just ask on his own time.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
So I bet Korean classrooms, kids are thinking, well, what if I'm the only one who needs to know this? Or, I don't want to waste the rest of the kids' time. I shouldn't bring this up.
That's a huge thing.
But Americans are just like, I need this, so I'm going to ask. Why wouldn't
That's
I?
why at the end of the class, when 교수님 says, do you have any questions? People, most of the time, I would assume, they're not asking it, not because they don't have questions, but because it's the end of class. And if you raise your hand, you're now wasting everyone's time.
Yeah.
And that's why I think a lot of the times after the class is ended, they run to the professor or teacher and ask
Koreans do, right? Yeah. Whereas in the States, it's like, well, he asked if we have questions, so I'm going to ask them now.
Well, also, professors, I remember, and even when I'm teaching something, I'll often say, hey, if you don't know something, odds are other kids in the class don't know it either.
So
it's almost like a way to make it more collectivist, like your individual needs are probably also needed by others. But anyway, I think that's something that maybe Koreans could learn from too, Jun. Like, if you're struggling with something, odds are other people are too. So by you doing it, asking questions.
But don't you think like sometimes there's this like, I mean, there's a line, right? There's always that one kid who like treats this as like a private tutor.
No, I get it.
Like, after questions.
And I'll guarantee you, Jun, even Americans are like, that's
annoyed
obnoxious.
with them.
That's obnoxious.
Exactly,
like,
it's not. I know.
Okay. But it's a okay, good segue into probably the last thing we can talk about, which is I don't think you can talk about parenting and education in Korea without mentioning the private education system, hagwons, right? I think it's famously quoted, Korea is the most expensive country in the OECD to raise kids, primarily because of the expected costs of private education. So again, we've touched on this before, but I think this is a good episode and a good chance for us to go a little bit deeper here. I don't know, Jun, or maybe someone could start by maybe describing the state of private education in Korea. I know, actually,
I think right now, from my understanding, it actually doesn't always start with parents being so much a stickler about academics. It actually starts with childcare. So in 초등학교 저학년, especially first grade, kids get out so early.
I know, isn't it crazy?
It's absolutely ridiculous.
So when does the
it's
first
like
or third
after
grade
lunch, so it's like 4교시.
That's 12:30.
12:30.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Wait, so for what grades the public school system in Korea let out their kids at 12:30? Is it first through third?
No, just first grade.
Oh, so in first grade.
It's actually like an adjustment period. So they let out the first graders earlier because it's their first year, and then they slowly increase the school day as they get older. And so part of the reason why parents start to send them to hagwons and do the 뺑뺑이 whatever is because there's this gap, especially for working parents, of like, you get out of school at a certain time, but I cannot be home to care for you until a certain point. So who's gonna take care of that gap? So for us, I'm lucky in that because he goes to a smaller school, there's actually more funding and more resources. So he gets a lot of 방과후 programs, so after school activities. So they have like a different program for every day. So that takes up a bit of time. And then from 방과후, he can go to something called 돌봄교실, which is like after school care. And so for first and second graders, they offer this, especially for dual income families where both parents are working. And so that program is actually available until like 5-6 p.m. So for us, I don't have the need of sending him elsewhere so that somebody's caring for my child. But a lot of other families do. And that's why they start sending them to the taekwondo hagwons and the piano hagwons and the music hagwons. So I feel like in the earlier elementary school years, they're not sending them to like 영어 and 수학 and 과학 and all of that because they think they need it academically. It's more, I need a place for my kid to go so I can send them to taekwondo. But if I'm going to send him somewhere, might as well send him so that he can get a little bit of 영어 or whatever. So it's usually 수학 and 영어. And then like maybe taekwondo and piano or something. But it's interesting because I thought, oh my gosh, parents are sending their kids to hagwon starting 유치원, first grade, because they want their kid to like be like drilled with academics. It's actually, I don't think for the most part it's that, at least where we are. Maybe it is for more competitive areas like Pangyo and Seoul. But where we live, it's more childcare. That's where it starts.
I'll provide another perspective, which is in the US too, there's a ton of dual income households where both parents are working. And of course, like childcare is heavily needed, right? Parents literally couldn't survive without it. But I'm wondering, because you're saying this might be the heart of or the origin of it in Korea, and then it just becomes, well, they're now used to going to after school things. Why not just throw them in something for math, throw them in something for English? But I will say it feels like in America it doesn't extend as much, right? Like, of course, when they're young, we need them for childcare. But once they're older, at least for me in my mind, it doesn't translate to, okay, let's just keep sending them to these after school programs so they can learn more and more and more. Yeah, I'm just wondering why you think this hagwon culture or this, private education became such an obsession in Korea, and maybe in your perspective, like when does it start? Yeah.
I mean, when we were at Choriwon, like when they were just born,
Yeah.
there were some people come from the academia side, and we'll show them, hey, your baby newborn has to read this card, like black and white color, like things like that.
Yeah, for their
For
stimulation. Because babies don't actually see in color for a bit.
Yes, yeah.
So it was like, yeah, this like whole curriculum.
That they had, try to sell this to the newborn mom.
Yeah.
I think it comes with a lot of guilt and also what the society tells everyone has to do it, or your kids will be left back.
But something that is interesting that we talk about is this may not happen in the States with academics, but it definitely happens with sports.
Yes, I agree with that. Yeah.
So it's like the 뺑뺑이 돌리는 거 with the hagwons in Korea is academic, but in America we see it all the time. It's like
sports.
kids are playing
Yeah.
sports all year round.
Yeah.
They're in like an activity or 2 or 3 every single day.
Private traveling teams from elementary school. Yeah.
And it's because why? For our generation of Korean Americans, it's because they want their kids to compete and be able to have access to like college educations with athletics.
Yeah.
So it's the same end result and destination. It's just the route and the path that they're choosing is very different. But the idea of keeping your kids busy and like full of activities and like jam-packed schedules, I think is not actually very different between Korea and America.
I'd agree with that. Yeah, now that you say it. And I think it's highlighted, we've talked about it before, right? Sports is so deeply integrated into American society, and it's not as much in Korea. I don't know what's causing it for me. Like, I feel like I still have this American mindset though. Like, sports are so good, right? It's like teamwork, it's like your health and body and everything.
You get accepted too by the people.
Yeah, but the idea, maybe that's it, it's the social aspect, but the idea of my kid being in a room studying for 4 hours versus playing soccer for 4 hours, the studying part feels wrong to me. Is that my American mindset?
I think the problem about the hagwon system is that everyone has to do it, right? I remember when I was growing up, maybe not me, but my brother definitely asked my parents to let him to a hagwon because he wanted to study, like he wanted to excel in his studies. And like there was always this constant negotiations of like, oh, like maybe like next year I'll let you go to like some hagwon. And then he was very happy about it. And so there are definitely groups of people who want to be more competitive and excel in their studies, and they intentionally want to go to the hagwons. But the problem is that because like the education system and society in general is so competitive, now the parents are thinking, oh, maybe if like he goes, maybe my kid should go too. And then like this kid, my kid doesn't want to go, but then they're forced to go now. And everyone goes kind of situation is, I think, the problem.
I agree
It's
with that.
the keeping up with the Joneses kind of mentality of like, I don't want to be the parent who doesn't give my child access to these resources when everyone else is. So it's this constant comparison and like feeling like I don't want to be the source of my child being left behind in some way. Whereas for us, I think we're always like, well, what's the purpose of this? Like, why? And it cannot be because the next child is doing it. That's not good enough reason for me, and for at least for Young. Young's like, so what?
Yeah.
Who cares? Like,
But that's such an American mentality.
I mean, all they need is 4 things, right? Stick, rock, water, and sand.
Wait, what do you have to describe that?
Because we have a sand pit outside of our house.
Oh, to survive, to play with.
That's their creative way of playing with.
I think
and
he's
figure
saying
things
that's
out.
all kids need for their childhood.
I see.
Yeah, so like...
But they learn so much things to like, I know my son, like, and our kids, they play with the sand pit and they create this channel and create this dam, how the water system works.
Yeah.
They get the nature. So, no, I think the classroom as nature is the most important thing personally for me, because it's the most creative way you could, learn. So instead of just learning about, hey, just tree here, I tell them, hey, there's an oak tree, pine tree, acacia tree, so chestnut tree. There's different names. So I think for them to learn actually seeing things and experiencing it through their senses, I think it's better than just having them go to hagwon and then learn about, I don't know, something that.
But do you not have guilt? I mean, I have a lot of guilt right now because I'm thinking, oh, like, what if I am holding my kids back by not putting them into these really rigorous hagwons, for academics, let's say math specifically. I don't know. I struggle with that. I mean, it seems in Korea too, if that's the culture, all my kids' friends' parents are putting their kids in it. Like, what I might be doing something wrong, right? Do you not struggle with that?
Because I think I see the opposite.
Yeah.
I see it doing more detrimental things.
Oh, really?
Because,
what's detrimental about it in your opinion?
They're stressed out. They don't get to enjoy themselves. They have no yoyu. They have no space or time to just be who they are, figure out who they are, what they think, or who they want to be. Like, it's just being told what to do and what to study at every given point of their day that, I don't know, I just feel like that's not conducive of like creating like happy individuals or at least like independently thinking, like critical thinking individuals. And for me, at least, I think if he wants to be competitive at some point, like it's never too late. Like he can choose to do that at a certain point. This is where I think maybe we're a little bit different is that our son is very good at sports. Yeah. Like very athletic. He's always had really good like hand-eye coordination.
I can attest to that. He's ridiculous.
We both really enjoy sports. And so I think just naturally he's grown up in an atmosphere or an environment where that was encouraged. I get slack from people back in the States of like, you should push him more.
I literally told you guys that.
Not just you, but other people.
I know, but I also literally told you this. Like, you gotta
like you're
see his
wasting
potential.
his talent.
You're
wasting away his 재능.
Yeah.
And I was like, at first, that stressed me out because I was like, am I being the parent who's holding my child back?
Yeah.
But for me, I argued in other ways where he can learn skills, but skills can only take him a certain way. Like at this age, he should actually be more well-rounded. So like athleticism, learning to run, like taking control of his body, like being able to work with his teammates. These like bigger skills and also softer skills. The actual nitty-gritty of hitting a curveball versus, a knuckleball, like he'll learn that later. That comes later in life. And so for me, keeping him back is not actually keeping him back. That's just the way that I think of it.
I just want him to have a good memory when he's older. Like, hey, just having a catch. You don't have to show him how to throw like curveball or how to technical aspect. Just have fun with the swing. But I mean, then I think
have fun. You guys are so American. But, have I become more Korean in this?
But I mean, I think it's good to give them opportunities. Yeah. I don't think you should let them try different things. Yeah. So like, if they want to play piano, they want to go to taekwondo. If they ask, like,
if they ask, then
I was like, sure, go try it. And if you like it, then.
But I guess for us, it's like, why make him do something he's not asking for, and it just being a cause of friction between our relationship? Because he wants to play baseball, so we let him play, and we let him play at a level that we think is developmentally appropriate right now, and also what's feasible for us as a family. So actually, this is where something I recently read that really hit home for me is Brene Brown. She talks about different types of families. There are child-centered families, there are parent-centered families, and then there are family-centered families. And I think when I heard that, it really resonated with me because I think a lot of times the families that like give that child as many opportunities and get them into this program, that program, very child-centered, thinking that that's what's best for the child. But the thing with us, that's not sustainable because we have 3 kids. Can we realistically do that for all 3 kids while both working, while having to take care of a household? So when I saw her reel on that, I was like, oh, this makes a lot more sense and it resonates more with me because we have to do what we see as best for the family as a system. And right now, if our son is playing baseball 7 days a week, that's not family-centered. That's only good for him, or actually maybe not even good for him because he's 7 and who wants to be playing baseball, 7 days a week. So I think that's something that we try to use in making decisions is like what's also best for the family and what's workable for the family right now in this season for all of us.
I mean, did your parents not quote Yo-Yo Ma to you growing up? My dad quoted Yo-Yo Ma every day.
I think you have a very unique
What
experience.
about
Really?
Yo-Yo Ma?
Yeah.
Like cello?
No, yeah, my dad was like, Yo-Yo Ma hated his dad his whole life. Still does. But he's the best cellist in the whole world. Right? Don't you think deep down he's grateful for his dad? I got quoted that to me almost every
really?
day. Yeah.
No, I never
Interesting.
heard that ever.
Wow. Because I feel like one thing, maybe, I don't know, we can wrap with this, but, you know, we won't get into why Korea has the lowest birth rate in the world right now. It's alarmingly low rate.
Yeah.
Some of it's private education, competitiveness, etc. But the fact remains, most families have one, at most, maybe two, right? And when you have fewer kids, right, like, again, leads to overparenting. Like, you can track every single minute of their day. And, you know, that kid is now, like, you're pouring everything into that kid. And you really are trying to get them into, like, you know, these... You only have one shot at, you know, having a successful kid, so that puts even more pressure on them. And the parents now feel like they have to give everything to that one kid, right? So I feel like that's the root of a lot of this, right? Like, the parents do have the resources and the time and energy, and combine that with, you know, the collectivist mindset or the Confucian ideals of like, hey, that kid's an extension of me. And like, you know, if they grow up to be successful, that's a reflection of my parenting. If they grow up to not be successful, that's a reflection of my parenting. It feels like to me that that's at least maybe the root of a lot of this, right? Because families just have one kid. All the focus, all the pressure, everything's in them, right? And so anyway.
I think it's also like a certain idea of what success is. I think maybe in America, there's a wider idea of what success can be. Like, I think a lot of people in America, like, are very family oriented. And so having a family, raising children, like, even just those things technically fall under having a successful life. But I think in Korea, a lot of times, at least this is my interpretation of it, it's very financial based. And I feel like that's sort of a part of Korean society that I feel is very unfortunate, because you've seen plenty of people that have tons of money but are unhappy. Like, that should not be the gauge in which we teach our children what a successful life is. But so much of Korean society is based on that. And so this is one last maybe story that I want to share is I had a play date with my son's classmates and their parents. And, you know, some of them are socioeconomic status wise, maybe not, you know, very well off, but I know that they are very involved. And this one particular family, the dad, so involved. Like, I've never seen a Korean dad like this, right? Like, he will bake with the kids. Like, the daughter said she wanted... The daughter is my son's classmate, and she said she wanted pizzapang. And he made it at home for her with sausages and like the cheese and everything. Next day she wanted like a roll, and he made that. And he does this with his children. And so I'm like, wow, that's amazing. Like, she gets to grow up with this dad that's very involved and loves her and values what she wants and is willing to do that. But the thing that he kept saying was, but I have nothing to offer my child because financially I have nothing to 물려줘. I have nothing that they will inherit from me, and I feel like a failure. Like, he was saying all these very sort of like negative things about himself, and I literally, kid you not, had to cut him off, and I said, you need to stop saying that. You need to stop thinking that, because you are now setting the tone for what your child is believing. You're giving her things that are far greater value than money, than what money can buy. And you should feel proud of that. And you should feel confident that that will go further in life. But because of Korean society and the mindset they have, he has this like scarcity mindset of like, I'm not giving my child enough. I don't have anything financially for them to be able to take along with them. And so I'm a failure of a dad. And I think that's sort of the unfortunate aspect of what we see happening is there are so many things that money can't buy, but a lot of times our focus is about what money can buy. And I can see that that's starting to infiltrate into like kids and their mentality. And so I think that's really unfortunate, but
very well said. Yeah. I think that's
I think you brought it up too, right? Like kids these days, like even like little elementary school kids, they meet and then they like ask like where do you live to like sort of kind of guess how well off
Gauge,
they are.
Yeah.
Which
That was, like-
brand of apartment you live in?
Yeah, what car
Yeah,
does
it
your
wasn't
drive?
it wasn't a culture at all when I was
No.
growing up.
Yeah,
So
we
I thought
never-
it was like almost kind of gross.
No,
you
even
know?
like 4 or 5 year olds are asking me. Yeah.
But where do you think they learned that
Yeah,
from?
yeah, their parents,
It's from
yeah.
the adults, and I think that's why I feel like really passionate about this type of conversation, and that's why I stopped that dad, because I really felt in my heart of hearts like, no, you need to set the tone. You're not of lack. You're giving your children so much, and if you keep saying you feel bad, they're gonna inherit that, right?
Yeah.
And so I think I wanted him. I don't know how if it made any difference, but I know for me, I felt really strongly that I should say something.
No, I think that's the perfect place to wrap, which is, June, earlier you asked, what would we bring from what would we take from Korean parenting culture to America? But the flip side of what we, hope that maybe Koreans could bring in from American parenting is the love of sports. No, just kidding. Really, though, that there are different definitions of success, and it's not just about maximizing your kids' financial outcomes, right? And there are different ways to be happy and successful that don't involve, let's say, money, don't involve just competing against the same, top college spots or whatever it might be, and that you can be successful and happy in Korea in different ways. And so I think that would be the perfect outcome, I think, if we could help push that forward a little bit. I'll be quite happy.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right, well, that's a wrap. Thank you all for
Can
listening.
you do a plug of my?
Yes, yeah. Before we end,
all yours.
Young or Grace, anything else you'd like to conclude before we end the show today?
Yeah, well, thanks so much for
no.
having me here. I'm
a
really
perfect part.
just really honored to see you guys in person. I just listened to you guys on podcast, but in real life, this opportunity. So I'm glad to be here. Thank you so much.
Well, there's a lot more we could have talked about,
Yeah.
and hopefully we can have you guys back on for other topics as well. So
Yeah, I guess I can just plug my podcast. I actually started around the same time as Dan and June, but they've been so consistent. And so, what do you guys have, like 50 something episodes now?
yeah.
Yeah. I don't have nearly as much, but I do cover similar topics of like parenting and what it's like living here in Korea as a Korean American. So, yeah, my podcast is called Motherhood in the Motherland. So,
I love the title.
yeah,
I
if
love
you're
the
interested.
content. No, Grace, your
thank
podcast
you.
is awesome. Yeah.
Thanks.
And as a loyal listener, I do hope you can publish more.
Yeah, that's the goal for the summer to
Yeah.
get a few episodes out.
If you like this episode and you want to hear more about parenting in Korea, please listen to Motherhood
In the motherland. Wait, none of us are mothers.
It's okay.
Grace should be the one to say.
No, I appreciate it. I liked how you guys said it together.
Maybe I'll start the fatherhood in the motherland.
No.
Fatherland.
Oh yeah, fatherland.
That's just not a term. though.
Yeah,
No one-
it's
okay.
awesome.
Anyways,
We'll put the link to your podcast, Grace, in
Yeah.
the show notes. And
I was a bit worried about this episode to begin with because I'm not a parent and maybe I can't like relate to a lot of things, but I think it was very inspirational and I really appreciate the way that you're raising your child and I think your children are lucky to have you as parents. So
Aw, thank
and
you.
thank you for being on the pod.
Thank you.
Thanks,
guys.
All right.
Okay. Thanks, everyone, for listening. See you next week.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Bye-bye.
Yeah, since this is a Korean American podcast, I love corny jokes too.
Yeah,
So
give us
you
a
have-
Konglish
okay.
joke.
Oh my gosh.
How long does it take to peel an onion?
5년.
Onion. Yeah.
5 years.
Yeah, 5 years. Yeah.
You got it.
You got it. Wow,
I got
nice.
it.
I feel like that's my influence.
Yeah.
Huh?
You think like a
Oh yeah,
Korean
yeah.
American
I kind of got the sense of what
The
Korean
accomplished
jokes
dad
are.
jokes.
Yeah.
infinite. We have so many.
Maybe we'll have a separate episode. 'cause
Yeah.
Oh my
I
gosh.
collect all the solo.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, corny
You
jokes.
write them down?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll keep it in the
Oh,
record.
yeah. We need to have you come on
Like
for that.
jokes.
Age.
Yeah.
Age.
Ajeg, yeah. So that was my plug.
Oh, that was your
Oh no,
plug.
actually.